I'd like to welcome Katrina Feeney, who works in Communications and Investor Relations at IMI PLC, and Grace Morreale, who is the Managing Director of Freestyle Live. It's lovely to see you both again. We are very excited to have the two of you here today. We've seen a lot of virtual events over the past year, and how you've been working is at the very forefront of what corporates are doing in live events. So I'm really looking forward to finding out more, and I'm sure our audience are too. But first, Katrina, for those of us not familiar with IMI, tell us a little bit about the company and your role within it.
Hi, Mita. Nice to see you again. Thanks for having me here today. So yeah, I'm Katrina. I work in communications and investor relations at IMI PLC. IMI is a global engineering company headquartered in Birmingham in the West Midlands, but with employees spread globally, about 10,000 around the world. I predominantly actually work in external communications, so PLC companies have to report regularly to the market, and that's what my department help do. Trading updates, results. We work on the website, and also I do a little bit of internal comms to link in with my divisional colleagues. Actually, running this senior management conference is, I always kind of say, it's a bit of a hobby of mine. It's not part of my full-time role, but it certainly does take up a lot of time for quite a chunk of the year in the run-up to the event.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Grace, tell us a little bit about Freestyle Live and your relationship with IMI.
Hi, Mita. Thanks for having us here today. So I set up Freestyle in 2011, mainly to service a couple of long-standing clients, whilst also freelancing with a few agencies that I was still close to. I've specialised in working with global clients for many years. So we're used to audiences with diverse cultures, mindsets and requirements, and have been delivering complex event programmes worldwide for quite a number of years now. So when Katrina got in touch a couple of years ago, they were looking for a new agency to partner with for their leadership conference, and being a global company as well, it seemed like a good fit. So we started developing our relationship and just learning a bit more about IMI.
Okay. So let's actually turn to the event now. Katrina, this event used to be held face-to-face, and this year it was virtual with a studio element. What were the objectives of the event?
So the 2021 event for us was always going to be quite significant because it was the first for our new chief exec. And as you say, originally planned to be face-to-face, actually in California, with about 100 people, which is a departure from what we'd been doing in recent years, which was 300 people based in the UK. So there were already going to be a lot of changes for us. The objectives of the event, we had this theme of one big team, which is really about how we collaborate on group and the divisions, how that helps us to achieve our objectives. But again, 2021 was going to be important because we wanted to take the time to reflect on the year that 2021 was for us through the pandemic, what we'd learned, how we'd basically got through it as a company. And then the final element was really to talk about the 2021 objectives and how we cascade that through the business. So those are really the three elements that we were looking to achieve in our events.
Okay, and did those elements sort of change as a result of the format changing to virtual?
Actually, not really, no. The theme was the same, but the challenge became how you make that engaging, how you make it different, how you still achieve the same thing with the delegates getting together, the networking, but in a virtual environment. So objectives and theming certainly didn't change. We just had to work out a different way of delivering it.
Mm-hmm. And Grace, how did you as an agency respond to that brief Katrina gave you?
Yeah, well, when COVID happened, we fully expected the event to be cancelled altogether. But then Katrina called up and we started discussing the options and implications of switching to a virtual event. Main thing is we did endless research into the emerging technologies available. We know we've got a really good team, and we drew on the knowledge of our expert team and industry peers to see what people were doing and to come up with a solution that we thought would be right for IMI at the time.
Okay, so early planning and some thorough research resulted in the proposal that was sent to Katrina. Katrina, that proposal didn't include basic meeting platforms like Teams or Zoom, which many organisations were using at the time. It included the use of Jam, and Grace also upped the game in terms of the production by including the studio element. So what made you decide to go down this route? You know, why did you decide to use Jam and not Teams?
That's right. I mean, we never really looked at what I would consider the mainstream options. You know, as an organisation, we use Teams. I feel that there's definitely been a lot of online fatigue. And really, we wanted to make something a bit special, that looked professional, that was engaging, and we weren't sure that the mainstream options had the same technical ability as something like your platform. And actually, we had worked with Crystal in the past. Crystal had delivered our voting platforms in our previous face-to-face conferences. And I mean, moving to the virtual world was quite scary for us. And knowing that we already had a relationship with you was actually really helpful for us.
Oh, thanks. And then just, you know, building on that, did you face any challenges in getting, you know, your stakeholders on board?
Actually, no. Everyone was on board with this idea of how we could make the virtual as good as possible. The most important team we had to engage with quite early on was our IT and security function, because of the testing that would be needed to involve, and you know, the help from them in enabling us to deliver as good events as we could. That was crucial, but we never had any pushback. Everyone was always completely on board. This is the Chief Exec's conference. Everyone works really hard to make it as good as it possibly can be for the delegates.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention the IT team, because many IT functions want their organisations to use platforms that they've already approved or are widely used. So it was great you were, you know, able to bring your IT team along the journey, which I'm sure, you know, helped them support the decision you'd made. So Grace, tell us a little bit about the event you actually delivered. You know, where did it take place? How long did it last? How did the studio element work with the national lockdown?
So the event took place across 3 days, and with a fully global audience, we had 150 delegates all connecting remotely from various different regions. And due to the different time zones, we streamed each afternoon from midday GMT for approximately 3 to 3.5 hours. We were broadcasting from a studio at PSPAV in the Midlands with a professional TV presenter to link it all together.
Okay, and within that overall format, what do you think worked well, and you know, what might you consider doing differently next time? What were the learnings?
Well, the post-event survey feedback has been invaluable, and we did learn an awful lot. We knew from the outset the challenge of keeping engagement levels high, especially with potential Zoom fatigue that we already knew everybody was suffering with, and delegates located in tricky time zones, so particularly those for who it would be very early in the morning or late at night. So we worked hard with IMI, with Katrina and the whole comms team to come up with a varied programme and engaging presentation formats. So we were looking at shorter presentations, fireside chats or interview style, chat show style interviews as much as possible. We included some team building, we had an engaging guest speaker, we pushed people into breakouts, and we included awards. And most importantly, regular screen breaks, which on the whole, we know that delegates responded well to. The live studio and the professional presenter really helped to anchor everything and elevate the communication to the level required. We did have to make some changes. Originally, the studio was supposed to be in London, but because of the ongoing pandemic changes and restrictions, we ended up moving a bit closer to IMI HQ in the Midlands. What we had planned to do is have more of the IMI speaker team in the studio with our professional presenter, and because that didn't happen at the time, that's definitely something we'd like to implement a little bit more going forward. It has to be said, I know it's already been mentioned, that technology did work really well. Obviously, huge thanks to the whole team, including your team at Crystal. But as we know, the pandemic brought increased security measures and firewalls, etc. So there was lots of testing, as you know, beforehand, and the support and cooperation of the IMI Group IT and security team was really invaluable. They were really on board with what we were trying to achieve. So the trust from IMI and collaboration was hugely important. And just to answer your final point, we know how important networking opportunities are to our delegates. So if we do go virtual again, we would definitely need to incorporate more opportunities for two-way interaction throughout.
Yeah, no, I agree. The networking element comes up time and time again, and I'm sure some of the other points you raise will continue to be relevant moving forward, especially around formats and things like that. So, Katrina, tell us about the actual impact of the event. Was it, you know, just a great moment in time, or has the event had a more lasting impact on the business?
Actually, the immediate impact of the event was really positive. Everyone came away enthusiastic, engaged, and I think quite a lot of that was due to the surprise element for delegates of the studio and the presenter and the professional set that we had. I think that makes a real difference. People feel that they are attending something that's a bit special than an everyday meeting. So in the post-conference feedback, one of the questions we pay a lot of attention to is, would you recommend the event to a friend or family? And we found that 86% of people scored us an 8, 9 or 10. So we were really thrilled with that, because you don't really know how people are going to respond virtually, when we know that in the past, everyone loves the group conference face-to-face. So we were really thrilled with that. And actually, the concept of one big team has taken off. The logo is everywhere. People were really engaged with that concept and taking it forwards, how we put that through the business. So that's really great, and that came from the conference. It's being well cascaded through the organisation. And there were some real highlights. You know, people love things like the wellness slides, the chair yoga, these kind of again, surprising elements that people weren't anticipating. So we were really pleased with the feedback. The chief exec was happy. Obviously, that's the most important thing.
No, indeed, and it's fantastic to hear that the messages have been cascading, and that, you know, the theme continues to live and, you know, dare I say, grow in the business. So, you know, given what you've experienced with this event, what are your plans for events moving forward?
Actually, we've just started talking about the 2022 events. It will also be virtual. You know, obviously, while the UK is doing really well in terms of vaccinations and infection rates, we have a lot of team members in India and Brazil and other parts of Europe where things are not looking quite as good. So the health and safety of our people is paramount to IMI, and therefore one more virtual event, hopefully, and you know, taking on board what Grace has said about how we can make it better. Hopefully our delegates will still be on board and understand our reasons for doing that.
Okay, and Grace, the same question to you. Given your experience with the One Big Team event and the other work you're doing with clients, how are you thinking about events in 2021?
Yeah, well, I echo what Katrina's just said. You know, we're finding that events with a UK-based audience are starting to trickle back, but as a large proportion of our work involves global audiences, like with IMI, I do think a lot of it will remain virtual for a while yet. Moving forward, you know, we know that there's lots of industry-wide challenges with hybrid. For example, which audience are you creating the content for? You've got two very different audiences and you need to treat them quite differently, but you can't have one as secondary. And of course, budgets. You know, everyone's used to doing more informal internal events on Teams now. The good production values will improve the effectiveness of that communication, and of course, that costs money. So whether, you know, whatever happens, whether virtual, hybrid, or in person, we know that we're going to keep a strong focus on dynamic content. You know, we know it must be relevant, it must be engaging. And of course, we're keeping a close eye on the new technology. So, you know, event platforms such as your own as well, you know, have all evolved so much. Even since we had our One Big Team event in January, there is no one size fits all, and it is only going to keep improving.
Yeah, you're right. Things are changing all the time, and in order to stay ahead of the game, we're all having to adapt, you know, really quickly to the changes.
Yeah, you're right, Nita. I mean, we feel we've managed to, you know, quite successfully pivot to virtual, but it was a very steep learning curve with many huge challenges, particularly the constant changes and restrictions and protocols, etc. You know, we had contingency plans coming out of our ears and had to just keep reacting quickly. So even without changing pandemic restrictions, we do know that virtual productions need so much more planning, you know, both behind the scenes and in terms of content development. There was a lot of new pressure on everyone, and I'm not just talking about us as a production team, but also on the IMI teams, you know, to pull everything together in a world where we, you know, for example, we couldn't just send a film crew to capture what we needed, or get everyone around a table to have those face-to-face conversations that really help you get to the heart of the culture and messaging. You know, all those side conversations that happen when you're in person that don't necessarily happen on Teams. But to end on, I'd say that everyone really pulled together to make it happen, and that to me is still the core of everything, changing world or not. You know, we know we have a huge network of expertise. We know we've got the competence to continue to adapt to the changing world, but I do firmly believe that strong relationships and open dialogue and trust are going to get us there quicker.